All right, friends, we are back. Part 2 of Dr. Scott Lyons and I chat about drama addiction, trauma bonds, and so much more, and how to heal from this and self-soothe. Here's the rest of our conversation. We are going to dive into how to fix this now.
Okay.
Because I think now we understand what it is and where it comes from. Can it come from anything else, or does it always come from trauma?
No.
Or could
I
you
mean,
just be an asshole? I'm kidding.
I mean, I am. Um,
I'm totally kidding. You're just trying to be funny.
yeah, I think it can come from a lot of things. It can come from, look, even a chaotic environment, like where families doing their best. It doesn't have to be early developmental trauma. It can literally be like there's studies that demonstrate, like if you live very next to or close to a train, like a subway, a train, that it affects your baseline cortisol levels.
No way.
So it's not just like, hey, here's this bad experience I had as a kid from my parents or from the next door neighbor or whomever, or a medical trauma. It's also like, what was the ecosystem like? And if we think about that and we sort of go meta a little bit, like, what is the ecosystem of our culture right now?
Mm-hmm.
If we're marinating in that, the urgency culture, if we're marinating in a lot of violence and sensationalism and competition to get attention, it's truly replicating those conditions that form an addiction to trauma.
Can it also come from you not having your needs met as a child?
Oh, yeah. Because trauma is not just about like an impact of one thing, it can be an absence of something like love or security. It's the absence of needs that is also trauma.
Wow.
And that's what forms often our attachment wounds, our early, ways in which we can, when there isn't a safe presence as a child, we never learn to regulate our own emotions because the function of a caregiver is to basically be like, I'm going to hold you and I'm going to anchor my own nervous system. I'm going to anchor my own self in safety and presence so that you can feel like you have an ecosystem where you can process and metabolize your emotions. It's called co-regulation. And that leads to self regulation, which is the ability to also measure how much energy and attention we need to navigate a situation.
So how do we
And so
get
when
to self-regulate?
if we didn't get co-regulation or self-regulation wasn't modeled in our childhood, I mean, we're
Yeah.
doing it right now together. That little practice we did, I grounded my own body when I said, can you settle your weight into the chair or can you feel the chair coming up to support you? I did the same. I was here for you and with you. I didn't do it for you, but I am here with you. And just that sense of going, ooh, there's someone here with me while I process and metabolize my experience. That's co-regulation. And then you learn from that experience to be able to do that on your own without an additional other. It's sometimes we want another person to regulate with. Like that's why often we partner up with people.
Yeah.
And or we have good friends that we call when like things are pretty crappy and we're like, "Hey, I just need to talk." And we feel co-regulated. Um unless we're trauma bonding when we call them. That's different.
Oh, wait, we can't get into the solution until we talk about the drama bonding and the trauma bonds, because I know all about trauma
Yeah,
bonds. My husband and I
I
have been
know.
in a trauma bond for sure.
How'd you get out of it?
Well, I think we just well, listen, we had similar traumas happening at
Yeah.
the same time.
Yeah.
So that's why I say we have a trauma bond because
Sure.
I had a psychic who was like, "You guys are like Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Like you're like guns in the hands, back to back. You're protecting each other." And I was like, "That feels really accurate, actually." So yeah, I always say that we understood each other so deeply
Yeah.
because of it. But he's the
Yeah.
calm one. He helps me regulate, so I can go to him and he'll put it all in perspective pretty fast.
So you co-regulate with him, and
Hmm.
then sometimes you might want to go on your own, and you just are able to self-regulate. You learned it from like that relationship, or
Hmm.
one of the ways you reinforced it was that relationship. Yeah, trauma bonding in that way is like, oh, we have similar wounds, we have similar ways in which, because crisis is a social glue.
Wait, what?
Like crisis, trauma is a social glue.
Wow.
it, and then not in a bad way. Like, let's not shame that at all. That's why, like, I hear people go, "We trauma bonded." And I was like, "Yeah, congratulations! Like, you met someone who you could deeply resonate with.
Yeah.
If you got lost in that, the like replicating each other's trauma, that's something different. But if you bonded because of a shared hurt and pain, that's what it means to be human." There are studies in Australia, really interesting studies in Australia, that demonstrated there were two groups of people. One group had to submerge their hand in ice cold, painful water uh, before doing a task together, and the other one put their hand in neutral, tepid water. The group that was stuck their hand in the painful water, the painfully cold water, bonded more quickly and was more effective in their group work, significantly more.
Wow.
And we know that, like, I my first day of school was September 11th, 2001 at NYU. So I was walking to my first day of class when I saw a plane go into a building. And I had come a couple of days before, like I think it was the day before I arrived in New York. And um everyone was mean. I'm like a nice Midwestern kid. And I'm like, hi everyone on the street. And they just ignore me. And like I remember I was in an elevator going to a yoga class the day September 10th. And I said, "Hi, how are you doing?" to some guy in an elevator, and he goes, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm from Minnesota." But I said it in my Midwestern accent. "Oh, I'm from Minnesota," because I had one then.
Dead.
And he goes, "Oh," as a true New Yorker would say, "The Midwest doesn't exist to me." And I was like,
Whoa.
"Oh, okay. Well, that's okay."
Oh my God, your
um,
accent's amazing. That's so great.
But come the next day and the following weeks and months, like that shared experience of crisis was such a social glue, was such a bonding experience. I
Hmm.
remember going on a bus to someone's house a few days after the event, and a woman turned to me, and this would never happen in New York. I was just sitting next to her on the bus, and she turned to me and she just asked, "Did you lose anyone?" And I didn't say anything, and we just cried together. And I've never seen her again. We've never spoken, but I feel her
Yeah.
and I feel that bond
I heard
that was
after it,
created.
everybody was saying hello to each other in the streets, which is, as you know,
Absolutely.
and we're saying
Yeah.
it's not normal.
It was not normal. It was like such a wild turn of events and experience to have that type of closeness with people who spend so much time like distancing themselves. We're so crowded together in New York. You create the space by basically not engaging with other people. So trauma bonding, trauma and pain is a social glue. We connect over shared experiences. Now, drama bonding is when we have shared experiences and then we're throwing logs on each other's fire. Yeah. So we both are upset about a politician. I don't know. That's an easy one for people to get
Oh my
upset about.
God. I have to
Exactly.
evade these conversations every day. I'm like, guys, not around me.
No.
I have
Yeah.
zero opinion. I'm a journalist. Keep me out of it. You guys have fun. Oh my God, I find it so toxic, all of
So
it.
toxic. And people love, like it's an easy subject to drama bond about. Like we're throwing logs on each other's fires, we're spiraling out of control and anger and intensity, and and we're doing it with each other. Gossiping is kind of like that. It's like, oh, I'm sharing the story about someone, and then they're adding a little bit of logs on that fire, and we're getting further and further away from our underlying feelings and needs, which is why it's called drama bonding.
Mm.
we're instead of like helping each other metabolize and process the emotions, we're feeding off them and amplifying them for each other.
Wow. Really great definitions there.
Yeah. And I think we've all done it. It's just when it becomes our like status quo of relating to other people is when, and for drama bonding, like that's an issue. We're not finding rest, recuperation, and health that way. We're
Yeah.
finding essentially more false connection and entertainment at times,
Yeah.
and a form of validation, but one that maintains a certain level of stress and suffering. So, what is the cost of it? What is the cost of this form of relating and connecting? It's
Yeah.
heavy.
It
It's
is.
heavy.
And it's toxic.
Super toxic. Yeah. And literally physiologically toxic. The more stress we create, the more of that activation, that first stage of stress we create without the completion of the stress response cycle. So there's 4 stages in a stress response. We get activated, it's that energy fuels us. The next stage is mobilization. We take that energy and we do something with it. Cool. I say no to you, or I move out of the way the ball, or whatever it is that I need to do. Then I deactivate. So the muscles, more blood flow goes to my organs. I rest and digest. I process the emotions. The tension that's created as part of the first stage of a stress releases so I can feel more of my body. That's called that deactivation stage, which is why in rest and digest, we're more attuned to the emotions of that stress response than we were before. Then I go into the final stage of a stress response. This is the healthy version. And I recuperate. I build up that energy reserves again so that I can use it to keep adapting, so that I can keep doing this dance of life, this stress response cycle. And for those of us who are addicted to drama or just have a propensity for it, we're revving ourselves up. We may never get to mobilize it properly. We never get to use it to properly adapt. We just kind of explode. And then the bigness of the explosion, too, masks our underlying emotions and needs. We never come into contact with that. We never rest and digest, which means we never actually go to restore and recuperate our energy reserves. So we're always living on an empty battery. And the only way so we can get a false battery is to go get another hit of drama, another hit of stress. It's like it becomes our caffeine to exist and live in this life. And that is dangerous. And it is toxic on the inside. It literally creates inflammation. So
Is
it's
that
like,
like backed by science?
yeah. So you have this big activation response, right? So you get a flooding of cortisol and norepinephrine, all these important hormones. And what happens is we tighten up as part of a stress response, right? Our muscles engorge to basically protect ourselves. Yes. So, and there's less blood flow in through our body. Now, if we stay in that tightness, yeah, if we never get to process or mobilize that energy, we never get to release the tightness. And that tightness creates a seal, and it doesn't allow more blood flow. So we have higher amounts of metabolic waste that come out of the cells without it being swept up and processed through. So we have more inflammation and more buildup of metabolic waste, which is basically toxicity. And our body registers that as pain. So unprocessed stress, unprocessed trauma, eventually through this process I described, gets registered as pervasive pain, which is why underlying that, what I was saying before, we walk around on eggshells. We also walk around with this anxiety, and we walk around with this underlying sense of pain and discomfort, dis-ease in our body, or toxicity. And so we try to go match or create environments that are also toxic so that we feel more normal.
Just had a little breakthrough. Another
Okay,
one.
tell me about your breakthrough.
So,
I'm loving these.
so I've had a lot of different hormonal situations health wise.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to get to the bottom of the hormonal issues. Why do I have so many hormonal issues? Not necessarily are my hormones on blood work wrong
Yeah.
or not good.
Yeah.
I think they've actually normalized probably since I started meditating a year and a half ago. But
Mm.
listen, the Mack truck was already coming, right? The
Yeah.
Mack truck couldn't be stopped at that point. It was already in play. The things that already had occurred, right? So the meditation's probably just slowing it down or making the hit less heavy.
Yeah.
But I think I just got to the bottom, thank you, of why there's so many hormonal issues. And it's because of all of this stress. And I
Yeah.
know it's not just me, I know women in general have such high anxiety and high stress. We're asked to do more than we ever were as women
Yep.
in different, timelines of life, right? We're supposed to be the breadwinners now. We're supposed to be the caretakers for not just our kids, our parents, our families, extended families, mother-in-laws. And then on top of it, we've got to plan everything. We're in charge of all the medical. We have so much real stressors. And then you're wondering why we are infertile, right? We had someone on the show recently said 60% of young, actually, it was a show I was listening to, 60% of young men and women are infertile in our country. We're wondering why. And it's got to be what you just explained, that whole process of the hormones
Yeah.
um, going crazy.
Yeah. I mean, let's think about it this way. When I was talking about that energy bank before, that energy account, that's another like less fancy way of saying homeostasis.
Mm-hmm.
It's homeostasis being our window of optional functioning in our body. And if we are constantly revving ourselves up, we're tossing ourselves out of that window of optimal functioning. Essentially, so our hormones, our cellular metabolism, all these physiological functions that are paramount for living and thriving are being jeopardized.
Yeah. Or ignored because there's a bigger battle to fight. So we
Or
can't
that,
do all these processes that we need to do here because we're in life and death over here.
yeah,
We're in fight or flight.
yeah.
And so, oh my gosh. And
That
and
energy
even that
has to go. Yeah.
even that cup analogy, I remember with Dr. Joe Dispenza, we talked about like I said to the team here when I came back from all the meditation events, I'm like, I just envision everything like a cup now. Here's my energy for the day. Where do I want to put it? And I
Yeah.
forgot about that recently. And
Mm.
now I'm going to go back to that. It's like, where do I want to use this energy? Do I want to use it on stress and fear and worry? Or do I want to use it on creativity and other things? So that's a really important thing. So now, okay, we know all of this now. How do we start to heal this drama addiction, these drama and trauma bonds? How do we start to do this work? Do you have to use somatic therapy? Do you have to use any other kind of therapy? Can you do it on your own?
Yeah. I mean, the last section of the book is a bunch of practices and a pathway towards healing. And I'll say that I've worked with a lot of people with an addiction to drama. And no one person has the exact same pathway. So there's not a prescribed way of healing, but there are sort of milestones that we can look at and practices along the way. And the first is just becoming aware of like, what are the ways in which you might be contributing to your own suffering, your own pain, your own stress levels? How might you be playing that song to amplify your emotion? Do you really need to? Did you really need to reply to that person in such a way right away that actually created more of a strain for you than a time for you to process and metabolize and deal with what it brought up? So awareness is a big first step. Is like how is this showing up in my life? And then once we've identified the how, we can start to see it enough to then apply some practices of like slowing down or making space between the words, like you and I did. It's like a very basic practice. Um, Part of even countering some of the urgency is I love this meditation of like taking the time to taste your food. take 30 minutes to eat an apple. The text, feel into the texture, the flavors, where it even came from, like the farm, etc. So you're really slowing down to taste life. Because one of the things in urgency that's pervasive in addiction and drama is you don't taste anything. You don't. You're just going, 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 going. And slowing down to taste would be too vulnerable. So starting to go, it's safe enough. I'm building enough sense that it's safe to slow down and taste the flavors of life. Even so, things starting with neutral, and then even things starting with good, because we have to counteract the significant negative bias that's very present for those who are addicted to drama. Like, oh, it's always something.
Mm-hmm.
The world is always after me. Like those type of like internal thoughts or comments. It's like no matter what I do, things always go wrong because they're not able to take in the good. They're not able to marinate in the good. So starting to do some practices of slowing down, tasting neutral, then like what's one nice thing in your day? And then how can you slow down and taste that in the same way you did the apple? Really building up a bank that you can be both safe and experience good in the world or in your life. So there's a bunch of different practices to notice when you start revving, speeding yourself up, getting that hit of stress, noticing what happens, when you are bored or anxious, how you might be hitting yourself, getting a hit to go back into that stress response, because that's the withdrawal symptoms right there. Boredom, anxiety are the withdrawal symptoms from the height of a drama encounter.
Wow.
Yeah. So notice if you need another hit, or can you hang out in the boredom? Can you see
Yeah.
what's beneath the boredom? And that was probably one of the hardest things for me. And I don't know if it's the same for you. It's like sitting in the boredom and not taking another hit of drama, or like turning my phone on to go doom scroll or something else. Like, oof, that was painful.
Yeah. Well, it's like you have to get comfortable with things you're uncomfortable with to change. So
Yeah.
for me, it was focusing on that and realizing, okay, I have to sit in this to get better.
Yeah.
To make any kind of change, you're going to have to do uncomfortable things, whether it's you're losing weight, you're going to have to not eat as many bad things and or unhealthy things, and you're going to have to go to the gym and it's going to suck the first couple of days, and you have to get through those uncomfortable windows. So
Exactly.
anything you want to change, behavioral changes, you have to make different choices. And sometimes those choices are uncomfortable. Dr. Joe says it's like crossing the river of change. It's
Mhm.
so painful and so uncomfortable. When I did it, when I started his meditations last January, I was so desperate that I was like, I don't see a river. I'm just like full throttle in this. I don't care if this sucks, if it's painful, if it's hurtful. I just need this change. So I'm not looking at this like the river of change is bad.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes for me to do this and to get to the other side, I'm
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
But you have to commit to that.
Yeah. And I mean, most of us, especially when there's something underneath the change, like if there's been a pain, there's a belief system that is built in that says, if I contact this, I'm going to drown in the pain. I'm going to drown in the river of pain. And it's going to be much worse now than whatever it is that like the behaviors I've adapted to avoid it and the consequences of those behaviors. So, things have to feel bad enough in the consequences of our behavior to be willing to dive into the pain.
Hmm.
So if we build up enough tolerance, enough capacity building for things that are good, for things that are neutral, it's like building a bigger body that can hold the pain, a bigger container. Because when we were younger, or when the incidents happened or incident, it felt like we were too small, that it was bigger than us. So to grow our resilience so that we are bigger than the pain, so that it can move down that river as opposed to us drowning in it, is so important in the healing process.
Wow. This was amazing. Friends, the book is called Addicted to Drama: Healing Dependency on Crisis and Chaos in Yourself and Others. We're going to put a link to that at the bottom of this episode. Uh, Scott, we have so much more to cover that we didn't get to cover today in these two parts that we're going to make this. But when you're back in LA, you'll come in and we'll chat some more. But thank you for this great work and for this great chat. I know it was uniquely timed for me today, so I'm super grateful as well, personally, because I just had epiphanies and reminders and refreshers on exactly how I need to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for going there with me and your beautiful vulnerability. Like it's such a beautiful modeling of what it takes to be able to come inward and address what's here in order to like get underneath that pattern of addiction,
Thank
especially to
you.
drama.
Thanks. Okay, friends, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please share it with friends who need it. I'm sure you know a few drama queens, and we are not shaming them or us or anybody. This is just stuff that we have to deal with and figure out. So share it with anybody that you think would be open to hearing this and learning. And don't forget to leave us a review and definitely get Dr. Scott Lyons' book, Addicted to Drama, wherever books are sold. We'll see you guys soon. In the meantime, be nice people, make good choices, and be present.